Hello everyone and welcome to the class on business analytics. In today's class, we'll be looking at how to perform cross-tabulation and chi-square test in SPSS window. First of all, let's open the SPSS software, and as we all know that we have variable view and data view. So variable view is the view in which we have the different variables defined, and for those variables we also define the values and the measure, that is the level of measurement for the variable. So there are four levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio. So in SPSS window they are just written as three measures: nominal, ordinal and scale. So in scale measure, the ratio and interval scale are clubbed together and written as scale. So there are these four levels of measurement. To just give a brief on these measurement scales, the first one is the nominal scale, which is kind of a name or label given to an object. For example, if there are runners or athletes running a race, the number assigned to each of the runners are called as nominal scale. So here, athlete number 7, 11 and 3 are nominal kind of data. The next scale is the ordinal scale, where we give a kind of an order to the objects. So here the rank order of winners. So after running the race, there are prizes given to the first place, second place and the third place. So the athletes who have come first, second and third. So this kind of an order which is given to the objects under study is called a ordinal scale. The interval scale is a scale where the objects are rated and the difference in the scale is equal, such that it equally measures the characteristics of the object being measured. So your interval scale, for example, is the performance rating which is given to each of these athletes on the scale of 0 to 10. So the difference between the scales is equal to the characteristics that are also being measured. And the final one is the ratio scale, which is the data where, for example, the time to finish in seconds. So here each of the athlete after running the race takes certain amount of seconds to complete their race. So that seconds is considered as the ratio data. Other kinds of example of ratio data are sales, height, weight, etc. Now coming to the cross tabulation. Cross tabulation is used when we have independent variable and dependent variable and both these are categorical in nature, then we use the cross tabulation analysis. Nominal data and ordinal data are considered to be categorical type of data, and interval and ratio data are considered to be continuous kind of data. So, when the independent variable is categorical in nature as well as the dependent variable is also categorical in nature, then we use the cross tabulation. So how you define your variables and what is the measure or level of measurement used to measure that particular variable will help you define what kind of analysis you need to run in the SPSS software. So here the cross tabulation helps you to study the relationship between two or more categorical variables. So for us to understand how we can run cross tabulation in SPSS software and how do we also interpret the cross tabulation results, we will use the merchandise SAV file in SPSS to run the cross tabulation analysis. So moving on to the SPSS window where we have the merchandise file opened. So we can see that there are 16 variables defined for the merchandise file, and the variables which are of importance to us is status and the TV bin. Status is the customer status, and for customer status we have two values defined, which is churned and current. One is for churned, which means that the customer is lost, and two is for current, that means the customer stays with us. And if you can see, the measure that has been used for this variable is nominal scale. The next variable of interest is the TV bins. Again, we have different values for the TV bins. Now, this TV bins gives us details about the number of TVs purchased by the customer. So, we have 1 as small, 2 as medium, and 3 as large. So, small number of TVs purchased by the customer, medium number of TVs purchased by the customer, and large number of TVs purchased by the customer. Now, as you can see again that we have the measure as nominal for this as well. And we also know that a nominal is a categorical kind of data. So, since both the dependent variable, which is the customer status, and the independent variable, which is the number of TVs purchased, are categorical in nature, so hence we will use cross tabulation. Now, where do we find cross tabulation analysis in SPSS software? For that, we will go to Analyze tab, Descriptive Statistics, and Cross tabs. We'll go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Cross tab. Click on that. So, initially, your cross tab window will look like this, where you have all your variables defined in the left hand side box. The variables that are of interest to us, namely the status and the TV bins, need to be moved either to the rows or to the columns. So now you can drag and drop these variables to either of the rows and columns. There's just one point to note that it is customary that your independent variables are always moved towards into the column box. So here also we're going to do the same thing, and we are going to move the TV bin, which is the independent variable, into the columns box, and the status, which is nothing but the customer status, into the rows, which is the dependent variable. Now, once your rows and columns have been defined, we need to select other few informations as well. There is one more information to be noted over here, is that it's not necessary that you need to have just one variable in your rows and one variable in your columns. You can have more than one variable in your rows and more than one variable in your columns. So when you get your output, you will have multiple tables showing the relationship between all these variables. For our easier understanding of the concept of cross tabulation and the interpretation of the results, we are going to stick to one variable in the rows and one variable in the columns box. So status is in rows and TV bins is in columns. The other information that we need to choose is in the cells box. So we'll choose the cells. You will get a cell display pop-up window opening up, and you need to select the counts and the percentages. So these are initially not selected like this. You need to select observed. This is mandatory while you do your crosstabs. It gives you the number of observed values in the cross tabulation table. Expected also you can select the expected count in case you need it to see what is the expected count in the cross tabulation table. So you can check this, but this is optional. The next input that we need to select in the cell display is the percentages. So we have a couple of options over here. You can get percentages for rows, column, or total. So for simpler explanation of the interpretation and understanding of the interpretation, we are just going to stick to the column percentages. And then click on continue. Once we have selected all these inputs and information, we'll just select on OK. Once we do that, we have the following result in the SPSS output window. So when you click OK, automatically the SPSS output window opens up and it displays you the result of the cross tabulation. So there are two tables that you get into the output window. The first one is the case summary window. This case summary window helps you to understand about the data set. So in the merchandise file, if we go to the data view, we will see that there are 3,338 cases in this particular merchandise file. The same gets displayed over here. So you can see the total count of cases is 3,338. Out of this total 3,338 cases, we have 3,338 valid cases and there are 0 missing cases. So you get to know in your case summary how many cases are valid and how many are missing for these two variables under study. The next table is your cross tabulation output between the status and the TV bins, that is the number of TVs purchased by the customer. So for easy explanation, I'm just going to put this particular output into the PPT and then explain over there. Now, before we even try to interpret the results, the basic objective of the cross tabulation that we have done between the number of TVs purchased and the customer status is to study whether these two are related or not. To study whether the number of TVs purchased is related to customer status or not. So this is the basic objective of the cross tabulation that we have performed, and we'll be trying to understand whether these two variables are related to each other or not. So this is the output that we have obtained in the SPSS output window. So in the output window, we can see that the status which we have over here was put in rows because it was a dependent variable. So here it is put in the rows, and the two options, the two values that we had, churned and current, are displayed over here. Their respective count, the expected count, and the percentage, the customer status churned percentage with the number of TVs purchased, and also the current percentage with the number of TVs purchased. So this is what is these three information given over here in these boxes. Now in the columns, we have the TV bins, which is nothing but the number of TVs purchased. So we had small, medium and large. So that is what are displayed, and the respective values with respect to the status is being displayed over here. Now also we had selected column percentages. So we have the column percentages displayed over here and the final total as well, for the total as well. Now how do we interpret these particular percentages? You can interpret your cross tabulation results with the help of count or your percentages. percentages seem to be an easier way of interpreting the results and also understanding the same as well. So we find that 37.8% of customers who purchase a small number of TVs churned, because this is the percentage with respect to small and churned. Whereas we can see that for small and current it is 62.2%. So 62.2% customers who purchased a small number of TVs stayed as customers. So they were retained by us. So here from this particular analysis of just the small number of TVs purchased and with respect to the customer status of churned and current, we find that purchasing of few TVs is associated with staying as a customer, because this particular percentage is higher. So if a customer purchases small number of TVs, then they stay as a customer with us. Now, if you see the results of percentage for medium and large, you will see that the percentages are quite higher for churned, 96.1 and 74.4% when compared to the percentage of current customers, 3.9% and 25.6% only. So from this result of 96.1% and 74.4%, it is understood that when the customer purchases more number of TVs, that is medium or large number of TVs, then we tend to lose the customers. So here from this particular analysis of the percentages that we have obtained column wise, we understand that the number of TVs purchased is related to the customer status. So if there are smaller number of TVs purchased by the customer, then the customers stay with us. If larger number or medium number of TVs are purchased by the customer, then we tend to lose those customers. So this is the analysis and the interpretation with respect to the cross tabulation. Now, after this result, how do you know that this difference in percentage, the percentages that we have seen just now on the previous slide, are not due to any chance? How can you prove that it is not just by chance that we have obtained such difference in percentages? Now, for this reason, in order to prove that these difference in percentages are not by chance and can be proved, that is where we get the chi-square test coming into picture. So chi-square test is one of the most common tests which is used along with the cross tabulation analysis. And in chi-square test, specifically the Pearson chi-square test is used when both the variables are categorical in nature. So Pearson chi-square test is the test that we'll be performing in the SPSS software. Now, what does this chi-square test determine? It determines whether these variables are statistically significant relationship or not, whether these two variables are having a statistically significant relationship or not. So that is what the chi-square test helps us to prove, whether the relationship is significant or insignificant. Now, for chi-square test, if you all remember, during statistics, you would have studied that this is the formula that you use for calculation of chi-square value. So, where chi-square, you have OI, which is the observed value, and EI, which is the expected value. So, when you do this formula and solve it, you get your chi-square value. Similarly, SPSS window also calculates your chi-square using the difference between the observed counts and the expected counts. So what is the observed counts? It is the number of cases we actually observe in each of the cross tabulation cell. So the cross tabulation cell, the values that you see over here, 1093, 98 to 58, these are your observed counts. And the expected counts, these are the number of cases we should have observed in each cross tabulation cell if there were no relationship between these two variables. So that is your expected counts. So since we had even checked expected count while we were performing the cross tabulation, hence we can see the expected count value over here as well in the cross tabulation table. If we would have not checked this expected count while we were performing cross tabulation, then this particular value will not have been seen. Okay. So now, what is the objective of chi-square test? Now, since we know that chi-square test helps us to determine whether the relationship between the two variables is significant or not. So, our objective for these two variables, customer status and TV bins, is to determine whether there is a relationship between the number of TVs purchased and customer status. So in cross tabulation, we had seen whether these two variables are related to each other or not. Whether do they have some relationship or not. In chi-square test, we are seeing whether this relationship between the number of TVs purchased and customer status is significant or insignificant. That is what we are trying to prove in these two, cross tabulation and chi-square test. So now let us move on to the SPSS window and perform the chi-square test. So from how and where do we perform the chi-square test? For doing the chi-square test, you need to again go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Cross Tabs. You will get the same window coming up. The extra thing that you need to select for performing your chi-square is you need to go to Statistics. So in the Statistics pop-up window, you have a couple of tests that you can perform depending upon the level of measurement of that particular variable. So here, since we have performed cross tabulation, and along with cross tabulation, we always perform chi-square. So we'll select the chi-square test over here. Now you can see that different tests are grouped together depending upon the level of measurement for the variables that you have. So if it is a nominal kind of data, you will do these kinds of tests. Ordinal kind of variables, then you'll do these kinds of tests. Nominal by interval, then these tests. So these tests are grouped together depending upon the scale of measurement. Now we are just going to perform chi-square test. So we need to check this and just click on continue. And after this, click on OK. So what happens is now you will get your cross tabulation as well as your chi-square test. The output which is of important to us for chi-square test is just this particular table. So now again I'll just try to copy this into a PowerPoint for easy explanation of the interpretation of this particular table. So this is the chi-square test output that we have obtained in the SPSS window, and you can see that there are a couple of values that we have. We just need to pay attention to the very first one, which is the Pearson chi-square test. We just need to pay attention to this particular test. So we'll just be seeing the value, the degree of freedom, and the asymptomatic significance, two-sided. So two-tailed test, and this is the asymptomatic significance is the p-value. So now, since the objective was to determine whether these relationship between these two variables is significant or not, the very first thing that we need to do is frame our hypothesis. And we know that hypotheses are of two kinds: null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis always states that there is no effect, which means there is no difference, there is no increase, there is no decrease. So we add a word no for null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is the one which we try to reject because we are more interested in proving our alternate hypothesis. So the alternate hypothesis is also known as H1, which is the main hypothesis that we tend to prove. So, how do we formulate these two hypotheses for the objective of the customer status and the number of TVs purchased? If we have to write it, how do we write it? This is how we write the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis. So, your null hypothesis will be there is no relationship between the number of TVs purchased and the customer status. And the alternate hypothesis is there is relationship between the number of TVs purchased and customer status. So as you can see, null hypothesis is always stating that there is no effect. So here we say no relationship. Whereas the alternate hypothesis is the one that we try to prove that there is a relationship, there is an effect. So we say there is relationship between the two variables. So this is how we write the null and the alternate hypothesis for our case. Now once we have written this null and the alternate hypothesis, how do we say that is the relationship significant or not? That is where your asymptomatic significance, which you can also say as the p-value, comes into picture. Now, if you can recollect, as we have already dealt with hypothesis testing in Excel, so if you can remember, there is a standard alpha value that you have, that is 0.05, which is 5% probability on both the sides, 2.5 on one side and 2.5 on the other side, that we tend to reject, and that is acceptable. So here it states that your p-value that you have obtained over here, so the p-value should be less than 0.05 in order for you to accept your alternate hypothesis. If your p-value is greater than 0.05, then you will accept your null hypothesis, which we do not want. So our main motive is this one, to always accept our alternate hypothesis, because that is the one that we are trying to prove. So your p-value should be less than 0.05. Now let's look at what is our p-value. So if you can see the Pearson chi-square, the p-value is 0.000. Now 0.000 is less than 0.05. So we can say that we can accept our alternate hypothesis. And what is the alternate hypothesis? That there is a relationship between the number of TVs purchased and customer status, which means that this relationship is significant. So there is a relationship between the number of TVs purchased and customer status. So the objective that we had, chi-square helps us to prove that it is significant. So I hope you have understood how you can perform cross tabulation, how you can perform chi-square test, what is the difference between cross tabulation and chi-square test, and how you can also interpret the results in order to add on to the findings of your research work or your project work. So that's all for today. Hope you have understood this topic well. If you have any queries regarding this particular topic of how you can perform cross-tabulation and chi-square test in SPSS software, please feel free to contact me. Thank you. Have a good day.